Hello everyone, and welcome to this dark journey. Tonight I invite you to join me as we uncover the secrets hidden deep within a place few dare to enter. This is the story of the expedition into the forbidden abyss. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from right now? And what time is it there? Is it the dead of night, perfect for a tale of mystery and danger? Or perhaps a quiet evening where you can safely listen? Or can you? Get comfortable, make sure the lights are dim, and prepare yourself for a story of adventure, death, and the unknown. Let's begin. The early morning sun was barely breaking through the dense canopy of the Schwarzwald forest as the expedition team gathered at the edge of the ancient woods. 10 people stood there, a mixture of excitement and tension etched on their faces. Each carried a backpack heavy with equipment, maps, and supplies, their breaths misting in the cold air. Dr. Maria Keller, the team leader, adjusted her jacket and surveyed the group. She was a woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes that had seen too many dark corners of the world. Her passion for uncovering mysteries had brought her here, to the infamous Black Forest, a place whispered about in local legends as cursed and haunted. Beside her, Jakob Müller, a local guide with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to hide untold secrets, checked the compass and pointed towards the dense thicket ahead. "This is where the forest begins," he said quietly. "Beyond this, few have dared to venture, and fewer have returned." The group exchanged nervous glances. Among them were Lucas, a rugged survivalist with a knack for tracking; Eva, a biologist eager to study the rare flora; Martin, an archaeologist obsessed with ancient rituals; Anna, a skeptic journalist; Thomas, a tech specialist; Sarah, a medic; Paul, a historian; Sophie, a young photographer; and David, an experienced mountaineer. They had come together to investigate a chilling legend, an ancient curse said to be linked to a long-forgotten pagan ritual deep within Schwarzwald. Stories told of disappearances, strange noises, and dark shadows that moved on their own. But Maria believed there was more, a truth waiting to be uncovered. As the team stepped beneath the towering trees, a heavy silence enveloped them. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss. Birds chirped, but their song sounded oddly distorted, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The path twisted and narrowed, roots and rocks making every step a careful calculation. Jakob led steadily, his knowledge of the terrain evident as he guided them deeper. The sunlight filtered weakly through the leaves, casting eerie patterns on the forest floor. After several hours, the group reached a small clearing where an ancient stone altar lay half-buried under moss and vines. It was a remnant of the old pagan worship that once flourished here. Martin knelt down, brushing dirt off strange carvings. "These symbols, they match descriptions from texts I've studied," he whispered. This place was sacred and dangerous. Suddenly, a chill wind swept through the clearing. Eva shivered and looked around nervously. The forest seemed to close in, shadows lengthening unnaturally. As night approached, the team set up camp near the altar. Fires crackled weakly, struggling against the oppressive darkness that pressed on all sides. Each member kept a wary watch, senses heightened by the legends and the uncanny atmosphere, but none noticed the faint, almost imperceptible whispers carried by the wind, or the shadow flickering just beyond the firelight. That night marked the beginning of a descent into nightmare. The forest, alive with ancient hatred and restless spirits, was watching and waiting. The night was thick with silence, broken only by the crackling of the campfire and the occasional rustle of leaves. Yet a growing unease gnawed at the edges of the team's minds, as if the forest itself whispered warnings too faint to fully grasp. Maria lay in her tent, restless. She stared at the faded map pinned to her backpack, tracing the route deeper into the forest. Tomorrow they would reach the site of the ancient ritual, the heart of the curse. The air outside seemed to pulse with unseen life, shadows twisting beyond the firelight. Suddenly, A low growl interrupted the stillness. It came from the perimeter of the camp. Lucas was the first to react, gripping his hunting knife as his eyes darted toward the sound. "Everyone, stay alert!" he hissed. The others scrambled out of their tents, tension flaring like wildfire. Eva held a flashlight, sweeping it through the underbrush, while David hefted a makeshift spear. Jacob silently motioned for calm, but kept his hand on his own weapon. From the darkness, a pair of yellow eyes blinked. A guttural snarl escaped before a shadow lunged toward them, twisted, unnatural, with a snarling maw and elongated limbs. Lucas stepped forward, slashing with his knife. The creature dodged swiftly, claws tearing through the night air. It was fast, impossibly so, with a ferocity that sent a chill down their spines. Paul fired his pistol, the shot echoing like thunder. The creature yelped but did not retreat, instead charging at Thomas, who barely dodged the savage attack. In the chaos, Anna was knocked to the ground, scrambling to her feet as the creature turned toward her. She grabbed a nearby branch, swinging desperately. The beast hissed, a sound like metal scraping bone, and recoiled just enough for her to run. Maria emerged from her tent, shouting orders and rallying the team. The fight was brutal and short. Lucas landed a deep cut across the creature's side, and David drove his spear through its chest. With a final, anguished howl, the thing collapsed into the undergrowth. Breathless and shaken, the group regrouped. The creature, whatever it was unlike any animal they had ever seen. Its eyes burned with malevolence, its presence a living nightmare. But this was only the beginning. The next morning, the team awoke to find strange symbols etched into the trees around their camp. Symbols that none could explain. The forest seemed alive with a dark energy, as if the land itself was marking their presence. Maria gathered the team. "We are dealing with something far older and darker than we imagined. The forest is fighting back." As they packed up, Sophie photographed the carvings. "These shapes, they resemble those on the altar," she said, voice trembling. Martin nodded grimly. "They're warnings, or worse, curses." Despite the fear, the team pressed on, moving deeper into the forest's twisted heart. Each step seemed heavier, as if the shadows clung to their very souls. Unknown to them, eyes watched from the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike again. The forest's oppressive silence lingered even after dawn, as if it too mourned the violence that had erupted the night before. The team moved cautiously, their nerves frayed but determination unwavering. They knew the path ahead was dangerous, but none anticipated the horror that awaited. Maria led the way, eyes scanning the dense undergrowth for signs of movement. The strange symbols etched on the trees weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Each mark seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, a silent promise of death. Hours passed, and the group's tension thickened. Then, without warning, a blood-curdling scream shattered the fragile calm. "Eva!" someone shouted. They sprinted toward the sound and found Eva sprawled on the ground, her face twisted in agony. Claw marks marred her arms and neck, blood seeping from jagged wounds. Before anyone could react, a second figure emerged from the shadows, a grotesque beast, larger than the one before, its eyes glowing red with fury. Eva struggled weakly as the creature advanced. David rushed forward, raising his spear, but the beast moved faster, striking him with brutal force. The spear shattered, and David was sent crashing to the forest floor. A fierce battle erupted. Lucas joined the fray, swinging his knife in wide arcs, attempting to distract the creature. Thomas grabbed a fallen branch, using it as a weapon to push the monster back. But the creature was relentless. It pinned Eva to the ground, snarling, teeth bared. In a desperate act, Eva dug her fingers into the creature's eyes. It howled, recoiling briefly, giving Thomas a chance to deliver a heavy blow to its head. The beast staggered, but then lunged at Lucas. The two collided with savage force, rolling over the leaf-strewn earth. Lucas fought with every ounce of strength, but the creature's claws tore through his clothes and flesh. Screams echoed through the forest as Lucas was overwhelmed. His body lay still among the shadows, the life drained from his eyes. The remaining team members fought with renewed fury. Maria shouted orders, rallying them to protect each other. Slowly, they managed to drive the beast away, but the cost was heavy. As the dust settled, the team gathered around Lucas's lifeless body, horror and grief etched on every face. "This forest is alive," Maria whispered, "and it's hunting us." Eva's wounds were tended to, but the damage was done. Fear now gripped their hearts like iron chains. No one slept that night. The forest's whispers seemed louder, more insistent. Maria studied the map again. The altar was near, but so was death. "We have to press on," she said. "For Lucas, for all of us." But deep inside, a new dread took root. The knowledge that the forest's darkness was far more dangerous than they had imagined. The morning fog clung to the trees like a shroud, wrapping the forest in a ghostly embrace. The team moved forward with grim determination, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. Lucas's death weighed heavily on their minds, a constant reminder that the forest was no ordinary place. Maria took the lead, eyes sharp, ears straining for the slightest sound. The map indicated that the ancient altar lay just beyond the next ridge. If they could reach it, they might find answers. Or so they hoped. But the forest seemed alive, watching. The shadows twisted unnaturally, and whispers, soft and sinister, slithered through the undergrowth. As they climbed the ridge, Ava leaned heavily on Thomas, still weak from her wounds. Her once fiery spirit was now tempered with fear, but she refused to be a burden. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the trees, carrying with it an eerie chant that echoed from deep within the forest. The team froze, their breath catching in their throats. "We're not alone," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. From the shadows emerged ghostly figures, translucent, pale, and writhing in torment. The spirits of those who had perished in the forest long ago, trapped between worlds. The team raised their weapons, hearts pounding. The spirits did not attack immediately. Instead, they moved in a haunting dance, their wails rising in a chilling crescendo. Then, with a sudden surge, the spirits lunged forward. Eva barely had time to raise her spear before a ghostly hand grabbed her arm, freezing her in place with icy grip. Thomas swung his axe, but the spirits slipped through his strike as if made of mist. Maria shouted commands, urging the group to form a circle. The fight was unlike anything they had faced. Spectral hands clawing, voices screaming ancient curses. David called out, "Focus on the altar. It's the source." They pushed forward, battling through the phantom's onslaught. The closer they got to the altar, the weaker the spirits seemed to become. At last, they reached the ancient stone structure, covered in moss and eerie symbols. Maria raised her voice in a chant learned from the old texts. The spirits shrieked, their forms flickering as the altar glowed with a soft blue light. With a final cry, the spirits dissolved into the air, leaving the team breathless but alive. The altar held secrets, ancient knowledge about the curse binding the forest and the souls trapped within. But the relief was brief. A new danger lurked beyond the altar's shadow. The forest was far from done with them. The eerie calm after the battle at the altar was unsettling. The team, still catching their breath, exchanged wary glances. The ancient forest was not done with them yet. Somewhere in the depths, a new presence watched, patient and unforgiving. Maria studied the glowing symbols etched into the altar's stone surface. "This is a binding ritual," she said softly. "It holds the spirits here, trapped in eternal torment. If we can break the curse, maybe we can free them, and ourselves." Thomas nodded, but his eyes scanned the surrounding trees. He felt a cold gaze, unseen but palpable. Something was stalking them. As they packed their gear to move on, Ava suddenly stiffened. A shadow detached itself from the dense foliage. A tall, spectral figure cloaked in darkness, eyes burning like embers. The team formed a defensive circle, weapons raised. The figure spoke, its voice a hollow echo. You trespass where mortals should not tread. Leave or perish. Maria stepped forward. We seek the truth. We mean no harm. The figure laughed, a sound like cracking ice. Truth comes with a price. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Roots erupted like serpents, twisting and snapping toward their legs. Ava barely dodged as a root lashed out, catching her ankle. She screamed, struggling to free herself as more roots reached for the others. Thomas swung his axe furiously, cutting through the living wood, while David fired his flare gun into the air, the bright light momentarily blinding their attacker. The spectral figure vanished into the shadows, but the forest itself had become their enemy. Breathing heavily, Maria cried out, "We must destroy the altar's binding stones to stop this madness." They raced back to the altar, but as they approached, the stones began to glow violently, pulsing like a heartbeat. From the forest floor, skeletal hands burst forth, clawing and grasping. David was pulled down, fighting desperately as bones scraped against his skin. Eva, still weak but determined, stabbed a root with her spear, breaking its hold on her. Thomas grabbed David's hand, yanking him free just as Maria began chanting, shattering the glowing stones with a rock. The forest screamed in fury, the ground shaking violently. Trees uprooted, crashing around them, but the grip of the curse loosened. The spectral figure's voice echoed one last time. You may have won this battle, but the forest will always hunger. Exhausted and wounded, the team retreated, knowing that their journey had only just begun. The team stumbled through the dense forest, wounded but alive. The curse had unleashed its fury, yet they had survived, barely. Each step was heavy with fatigue and fear, but Maria's resolve remained unbroken. We need to find shelter before nightfall, she urged. The forest grows darker as the sun sets. It hides things, terrible things. Thomas helped David walk, his leg badly bruised from the skeletal grasp. Eva, still pale but determined, scanned the surroundings with sharp eyes. As they moved deeper into the forest, a thick mist began to roll in, swallowing the trees in a ghostly haze. Shapes shifted in the fog, eyes watching, waiting. Suddenly, a low growl echoed. From the mist emerged a pack of grotesque creatures, their limbs twisted, faces barely human, eyes glowing with hunger. "Prepare yourselves," Thomas shouted, drawing his axe. The team formed a tight circle. The creatures attacked with ferocious speed, claws slashing and teeth gnashing. Eva parried a strike, stabbing her spear into one monster's side, but more came. David fired his pistol blindly into the fog, but the creatures vanished, only to reappear behind him. One tackled him to the ground, snapping jaws inches from his face. Maria ran forward, swinging a heavy branch. She struck the creature's skull, cracking bone, but its grip tightened around David's throat. Thomas charged, cleaving through another beast before grabbing the creature choking David and tearing it away. The fight was brutal and chaotic. The team was outnumbered, but their determination was fierce. Eva managed to spear one creature through the heart, but the rest closed in. A claw raked across her arm, drawing blood. Maria cried out, her voice fierce, "We fight for our lives. No surrender." Gradually, the creatures retreated into the mist, howling in frustration. The forest fell eerily silent once more. Breathing heavily, the team regrouped. They were shaken, but alive. Maria looked around, her gaze steely. This forest is alive with anger. We must find the source, or be consumed. After the harrowing fight, the survivors, Maria, Thomas, Eva, and David, pressed forward cautiously. The forest's eerie silence weighed heavily on them, and the creeping mist blurred their vision. "Whatever controls this place is close," Maria whispered. "I can feel it." The trees grew taller and denser, their gnarled branches twisting like claws reaching for the sky. The air thickened with an almost suffocating presence, as if the forest itself was alive and watching. Thomas, still nursing his wounds but resolute, led the group toward a narrow path barely visible beneath the foliage. "This way," he said, voice low. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A deep rumble rolled through the earth, and from the soil erupted dozens of skeletal hands clawing upward. The group scrambled backward as the hands grasped wildly, dragging from the ground a towering figure cloaked in tattered robes, the ancient guardian of the forest, a monstrous entity cursed to protect the dark heart of the woods. Its hollow eyes glowed red, and a chilling howl erupted from its throat. "This is it," Maria said grimly, "the source of the curse." The guardian raised a massive, decayed arm and swung it toward them with terrifying force. Thomas dodged, slashing with his axe. The blade shattered upon impact, but the blow staggered the creature. Eva hurled her spear, piercing the guardian's shoulder. The creature howled, its robes flapping wildly as it lunged at her. David fired his pistol, but the bullets passed through the ethereal form as if it were smoke. Maria grabbed a jagged shard of stone nearby and stabbed at the creature's chest. The shard glowed with a faint blue light on contact. The guardian screamed, momentarily retreating. "Keep attacking, we can weaken it," Maria urged. The fight was desperate and brutal. The guardian's strikes shattered trees and sent them flying, but the team's attacks landed with increasing effect. Finally, with a powerful, coordinated effort, they managed to push the guardian back toward a glowing sigil etched into the ground. The creature screamed in rage, thrashing wildly as the sigil's light enveloped it. With a final, bone-rattling howl, the guardian was drawn into the sigil, vanishing in a burst of eerie blue flames. The forest seemed to breathe again. The oppressive darkness lifted, replaced by a calm, peaceful silence. Maria knelt, exhausted but triumphant. The curse is broken, the forest is free. But as they caught their breath, Eva noticed movement from the shadows, eyes watching. The fight might be over, but the forest still held secrets. The battle had ended, but the forest was far from safe. Though the guardian was vanquished, the air remained thick with unease. Maria stood, rubbing her bruised arms. "We broke the curse, but I can't shake the feeling something else is watching us." Thomas nodded, eyes scanning the shadows between the trees. "This place, it's like a living nightmare." David lit a small fire to dry their clothes, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the twisted trunks around them. Eva approached the fire quietly, her spear still clutched tightly. "We need to keep moving. The forest won't stay calm for long." As the group settled for a brief rest, Maria pulled out the ancient journal she had found at the village library before their expedition. Flipping through the yellowed pages, she read aloud, "When the guardian falls, the forest's darkness will seep into the souls of the living. Only the light of the ancients can cleanse it." "What is the light of the ancients?" David asked. Maria looked up. "It's a legend about a hidden shrine deep in the mountains beyond the forest. The villagers say it holds a powerful relic capable of purifying evil." "Then that's where we need to go," Thomas said firmly. "If the curse isn't truly broken, we have to find that shrine." The night deepened. Strange noises echoed, whispers, footsteps just beyond sight. Suddenly, from the thick underbrush, a pack of shadowy creatures emerged. Their forms were twisted, almost human but distorted, eyes glowing with malice. The group jumped to their feet, weapons ready. The creatures attacked in a frenzy, claws slashing, teeth gnashing. Thomas fought fiercely, blocking a savage strike with his arm, bleeding but unyielding. Eva's spear found the throat of one creature, silencing its howl. Maria dodged a swipe, pulling a dagger from her belt to defend herself. David fired his pistol repeatedly, each shot tearing through the spectral forms. But more kept coming. The battle was brutal and desperate. One by one, the shadow creatures fell, but the group was pushed back toward a cliff's edge. Maria shouted, "We can't let them corner us." In a final act of defiance, Thomas charged through the enemies, his axe cleaving a path, buying time for the others to retreat. Breath ragged and wounds bleeding, the survivors scrambled up a rocky path away from the monsters. At the top, they found a strange altar carved from stone, glowing faintly with blue light. A beacon, perhaps, from the ancients. Eva touched the altar. This might be the start of the path to the shrine. Maria looked to the horizon where the mountains loomed. We'll rest here briefly, then move out at dawn. The forest's darkness had not been defeated. It had only shifted. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. Dawn broke slowly over the jagged peaks, casting pale light on the battered group resting beside the ancient altar. The forest behind them still whispered with unseen threats, but ahead lay the mountains, and with them, their hope. Maria was the first to rise, brushing dirt from her torn clothes. We have to keep going. The shrine won't wait for us. Thomas gathered the remaining supplies, his face grim but determined. We're running out of time. Whatever darkness lingers here will only grow stronger. The climb was harsh. Narrow trails wound between rocky outcrops, and the air thinned with every step. Their bodies ached from wounds and exhaustion, but the promise of the ancient's light spurred them onward. Ava led cautiously, her spear poised for attack. The forest's shadowy creatures could still be lurking, ready to pounce. As they ascended, strange symbols carved into stones began to appear, ancient runes glowing faintly in the morning mist. Maria traced her fingers over one, feeling a surge of energy pulse beneath her skin. Suddenly, a deafening roar shattered the silence. From a ridge above, a monstrous beast emerged, its form massive and covered in dark scales, eyes blazing with fury. The group froze. This was no ordinary predator. Thomas stepped forward, gripping his axe tightly. "Stand behind me. We face this together." The beast charged, claws raking the earth. Thomas met it head-on, swinging his axe with all his might. The creature howled in pain but retaliated with a powerful swipe that sent Thomas sprawling. Maria and Eva rushed to his aid, striking at the beast's legs to slow it down. David fired his pistol, each shot echoing through the mountain air. The fight was brutal. The beast's strength was overwhelming, but the group's will to survive was stronger. With a final coordinated effort, Maria plunged her dagger into the beast's eye, while Thomas delivered a crushing blow to its neck. The creature collapsed with a guttural scream, its massive body twitching before falling still. Breathing heavily, the group stood over their fallen foe. The path to the shrine was clear, but they knew more dangers awaited. As they pressed on, the mountains grew steeper and colder. Nightfall brought a biting chill, and shadows lengthened into eerie shapes. At their camp, a strange silence settled. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the night. They rushed out to find David missing. Only his pistol lay abandoned in the dirt. Panic surged through the group. "We can't lose anyone else," Eva whispered fiercely. The mountain held its secrets tightly, and the darkness was far from over. The cold night air clung to their skin as the group huddled around the dwindling fire. David's disappearance was a heavy shadow hanging over them. No one dared to speak, afraid that breaking the silence would invite the same fate. Maria's eyes scanned the darkness beyond the flickering flames. "We need to find him. We can't leave anyone behind." Thomas nodded, his jaw tight. "Agreed, but we must be careful. Whatever took him might still be nearby." Eva, ever vigilant, checked her spear. "I'll lead the search. The forest feels different tonight, like it's watching us." They moved as one, footsteps muffled against the rocky earth. The shadows seemed to twist and pulse with malevolent life. Every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves sent their hearts racing. Suddenly, a guttural growl broke the stillness. From the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes appeared, followed by another and then another. Dozens of eyes encircling them. Wolf-like creatures, their fur mottled and patchy, snarled and circled, blocking any retreat. Thomas raised his axe. "Stand your ground." The battle was fierce. The creatures lunged, teeth snapping. Eva thrust her spear forward with precision, piercing one beast's throat. Maria swung a makeshift club, crushing skulls. Thomas fought with relentless fury, blocking attacks and striking back hard. But they were outnumbered. Amid the chaos, a scream tore through the night. Maria's. She staggered back, clutching her side, blood seeping between her fingers. One creature had sunk its teeth deep into her flesh. Thomas roared in anger and swung his axe, severing the beast's head. "Maria!" Eva rushed to her side, applying pressure to the wound. But it was too late. Maria's breath came shallow, her eyes dimming. "Find David before it's too late," she whispered. Tears blurred Eva's vision as Maria's body went limp. The creatures retreated into the shadows, leaving the group shaken and wounded. Thomas looked at the remaining three. Eva himself, and the silent David still missing. "We don't have time to mourn. We find David, or we all perish." They pressed deeper into the forest, guided by faint sounds and instinct. Then a faint cry echoed through the trees. David, rushing toward the sound. They found him trapped in a pit, bruised and bleeding, but alive. Relief surged through them, but danger was not over. As they pulled David out, the ground trembled. From beneath the earth, skeletal hands burst forth, grasping and clawing. The forest itself seemed to rise against them. Thomas grabbed a fallen branch, swinging at the grasping bones. Eva fired her pistol, shattering some of the rising skeletons. David found strength in desperation, kicking and fighting as they escaped the pit. Breathless and battered, they scrambled away just as the pit collapsed, swallowing the bones back into the earth. The forest fell silent once more, but the group knew this was only the beginning. The darkness here was alive, and it hunted. The forest around them seemed to breathe with a sinister life. Every step forward was a fight against the creeping dread that slithered through the trees like invisible serpents. The memory of Maria's death haunted their every move. Her scream, the savage attack, the desperate battle for survival. It was a grim reminder that whatever lurked here was not just a mindless beast, but a calculating predator. Thomas tightened his grip on his axe, his knuckles white. "We need to push forward. Staying still only invites death." Eva nodded silently, her eyes darting to every shadow. David, still shaken and bruised, stumbled alongside them, eyes wide with fear. The forest whispered, faint voices like broken breaths carried by the wind. Suddenly, Eva stopped, raising a hand. "Listen." A low, sibilant whisper floated through the trees, words indistinct but filled with malice. It was as if the forest itself was speaking in a tongue meant to unnerve and confuse. Thomas glanced around, axe raised, ready to strike at any sudden threat. From the darkness, shadowy figures began to emerge, tall, slender silhouettes flickering like smoke between the trees. Their eyes glowed faintly red. Their movements were unnervingly smooth and silent. "They're coming," David whispered, voice trembling. The figures circled, weaving through the undergrowth, their forms blending seamlessly with the night. Eva steadied her breath, raising her pistol. Suddenly, one figure lunged at her with impossible speed. Eva barely had time to fire a shot, the bullet striking the creature's chest and causing it to vanish into smoke. The others hissed and swarmed. The group was surrounded. Thomas swung his axe, cleaving through one shadowy form, but it only seemed to split into more tendrils of darkness that slithered away, reforming into new shapes. Eva fired rapidly, each shot cutting through the eerie silhouettes. David grabbed a fallen branch, swinging wildly to keep the shadows at bay. The shadows attacked relentlessly, their forms shifting, slipping through cracks and grasping at their victims with cold, intangible hands. Thomas caught a shadow by the wrist and yanked hard. The figure let out a chilling, echoing scream before dissolving into mist. "Keep fighting!" Thomas shouted. "They feed on fear." Eva realized the truth. If they let panic consume them, the shadows would overpower their minds, breaking their will. With fierce determination, the group fought as one, refusing to succumb to the terror. Minutes stretched like hours as the battle raged. Slowly, the shadows began to wane, retreating back into the forest's depths. Breathing heavily, the trio stood victorious but exhausted. David looked at Thomas and Eva, his voice a trembling vow. "We must reach the heart of this place, the source. Only then can we end this nightmare." Thomas nodded. One step at a time. The whispering ceased, but the forest remained alive with menace. The shadows would return, but for now they had survived. The journey deeper into the forest grew darker, both literally and figuratively. The canopy thickened, blocking out even the faintest glimmers of moonlight, casting the trio into a near-complete blackness. The oppressive silence was broken only by the crunch of twigs beneath their boots and the occasional distant howl of an unknown creature. Thomas led the way, his axe now more than a weapon, a symbol of hope and defiance. Eva stayed close behind, pistol drawn, every nerve alert. David's eyes were wide but determined, the weight of their recent battles pressing heavily on him. After hours of walking, the forest began to change. The trees grew twisted and gnarled, their bark blackened as if burned. The air felt colder, almost unnatural, and a foul stench hung in the atmosphere, clawing at their throats. "This is it," Thomas whispered, voice low. The heart of the darkness. Before them lay a clearing, shrouded in thick mist. At its center was an ancient stone altar, covered in strange cryptic symbols glowing faintly with a sickly green hue. Around the altar, the ground was stained with dark, dried blood. Eva stepped forward cautiously, scanning the area. "This place, it feels alive." Suddenly, the earth trembled beneath their feet. From the shadows surrounding the clearing, twisted creatures emerged, half human, half beast, monstrous forms with jagged claws and eyes burning with hatred. The trio barely had time to react. Thomas swung his axe fiercely, splitting the arm of one beast before it lunged again. Eva fired, but the creature's skin seemed to absorb the bullets, their growls growing louder, more furious. David grabbed a fallen branch, swinging desperately to keep a snarling creature at bay. The battle was brutal and chaotic. Claws raked flesh, teeth tore clothing, and the air was filled with the sounds of struggle and pain. Thomas shouted, "Focus on the altar. We need to destroy whatever is empowering these things." Eva nodded, dodging a swipe from a beast. She fired at the glowing symbols on the altar, shattering the stone with a powerful shot. A terrible roar erupted as the creatures shrieked in agony. The altar cracked, releasing a dark mist that swirled violently before dissipating. The beasts faltered, their strength fading. One by one, they collapsed into dust and shadow. Exhausted but alive, the trio stood silently, the clearing now eerily quiet. David whispered, "We did it. We ended the source of this nightmare." Thomas placed a hand on Eva's shoulder. "But we're not safe yet. There might be more to this place than we know." As they prepared to leave, the first rays of dawn broke through the forest canopy, illuminating the path forward, a fragile promise of hope amidst the darkness. The morning sun had barely risen when the trio stepped out of the shadowed clearing. Their bodies ached, bruised and bloodied from the fierce battle, but their spirits remained unbroken. As they moved forward, the forest seemed to breathe around them, whispering secrets from a time long forgotten. David took the lead, his eyes scanning the undergrowth for any sign of danger. That altar, it felt like the center of some ancient evil. But what created it? Who built that place? Eva shook her head. "I don't know. But whatever it was, it's tied to the disappearances we've been investigating." Thomas grunted. "We're close to the answer. We need to keep moving." The forest slowly thinned as they ascended a rocky ridge, revealing the remnants of a long-abandoned village. Crumbled stone houses lay half-buried under thick vines, their windows shattered and doors torn off their hinges. The silence here was heavy, almost oppressive. Eva raised her pistol. "Stay alert. This place feels wrong." They stepped carefully through the deserted streets. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept past them, carrying faint echoes of voices and footsteps. Echoes from the past. David paused, listening. "Do you hear that?" Thomas nodded grimly. "The spirits of those who lived here." They never left. As they explored, they discovered carvings on the walls depicting rituals, sacrifices meant to appease a dark force. The villagers had once worshipped something ancient and cruel. Without warning, shadowy figures materialized among the ruins, spectral forms twisted with rage and sorrow. The spirits of the dead, trapped between worlds, their faces distorted by pain. Eva fired into the apparitions, but her bullets passed harmlessly through. Thomas swung his axe, striking at nothing but missed. David shouted, "We can't fight them like this." "Remember what the old text said," Thomas yelled. "They fear light and fire." Eva pulled out a flare gun, firing into the mass of spirits. The blaze erupted in a brilliant burst of light, forcing the ghosts to recoil with agonized wails. Taking advantage of the moment, David ignited several torches around the village ruins. The flames roared to life, pushing the spirits back, their anguished cries fading. "We need to find the source," Eva said, panting. "Whatever is binding them here." They followed the faint glow deeper into the village, arriving at a sunken well surrounded by eerie carvings. The air grew colder as they peered into its depths. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the darkness below, grabbing David's ankle. He screamed as he was pulled toward the abyss. Thomas lunged forward, chopping the hand away just in time. "Get back," Thomas commanded. "This well is a gateway." Eva's heart pounded. "A gateway to what?" Thomas answered grimly. "To the darkness we're fighting, and maybe to salvation as well." The three looked down into the black void, knowing that the final confrontation awaited them below. The three stood at the edge of the ancient well, its depths swallowed by an unnatural darkness that seemed to absorb the very light around it. The air was thick, suffocating, and filled with a chilling silence broken only by the distant howl of unseen creatures. David tightened his grip on his flashlight and glanced at Eva and Thomas. "This is it. Whatever holds the key to all this horror lies below." Eva nodded, checking her pistol and pulling out a coil of rope. "We need to be ready for anything." Thomas readied his axe, his eyes sharp and determined. "Let's move." One by one, they began their descent. The rope creaked under their weight as they lowered themselves into the abyss. The walls of the well were slick with moss and something darker, an oily residue that seemed to pulse beneath their touch. As they reached the bottom, the beam of their flashlights revealed an ancient chamber carved into the bedrock. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, casting eerie shadows. Suddenly, the air shifted. A low growl echoed through the chamber, followed by the rustling of unseen movement. From the shadows, monstrous forms emerged, hulking creatures twisted by dark magic, their eyes burning with malevolent fire. David swung his flashlight like a club, striking one creature's face, but it barely flinched. Eva fired her pistol, bullets tearing into flesh, but the beasts seemed almost impervious. Thomas charged forward, axe raised, slashing through one creature's arm. It howled in pain and fury, retaliating with a swipe that caught Thomas's shoulder, drawing blood. "Hold the line," Thomas shouted. The battle was brutal. The creatures fought with savage strength and unnatural speed. David narrowly dodged a claw swipe that tore through the stone wall behind him. Eva reloaded frantically, firing round after round, each bullet finding flesh but failing to stop the onslaught. One beast lunged at David, jaws snapping dangerously close. He shoved it back with all his might, stumbling but alive. Thomas roared, hacking off the creature's leg, but more emerged from the shadows surrounding them. Eva grabbed a flare from her belt and hurled it into the group. The flare erupted in a blinding light and searing heat, causing the beasts to shriek and retreat momentarily. "We can't keep this up," David gasped. "We need to find the source controlling them." "Follow me," Thomas commanded, limping but determined. They pushed deeper into the chamber, the symbols on the walls growing brighter and more intense. At the center was a pedestal upon which rested a dark, pulsating orb. It seemed alive, throbbing with a sinister energy that filled the room. Thomas approached cautiously, axe ready. "Destroy it, and maybe we end this nightmare." But as he swung, the orb unleashed a shockwave of dark energy, throwing them back violently. Eva crashed against the wall, gasping for breath. David barely managed to stay on his feet. The creatures, reinvigorated, surged forward. Thomas stood his ground, swinging his axe wildly, buying time for Ava and David to recover. "We need to work together," Ava shouted. "David, the orb. Distract it. I'll try to shoot it." David nodded and darted toward the pedestal, flashlight beam focused on the orb. It flickered and pulsed, reacting to his presence. Ava steadied her aim and fired. The bullets struck the orb, causing cracks to form on its surface. The orb screamed, a sound that seemed to pierce their very souls. The chamber began to shake as the orb's energy destabilized. The creatures howled, caught in a maelstrom of light and shadow. With a final, desperate swing, Thomas brought his axe down on the orb, shattering it into fragments that dissolved into the air like smoke. The darkness lifted. The chamber's oppressive atmosphere faded, replaced by a calm silence. They collapsed, exhausted but victorious. David looked around. "Is it really over?" Eva smiled faintly. "Maybe, but we'll need to be ready if anything else is out there." Thomas nodded. "We survived the worst. Now we bring the truth back." As they began their climb out of the abyss, the first rays of dawn pierced through the forest canopy. The nightmare was ending, but the echoes of the darkness would linger forever. The early morning light filtered through the dense canopy, casting long shadows over the ruined chamber where the orb had been destroyed. The air felt lighter, the oppressive darkness lifted, but the survivors, so David, Eva, and Thomas, knew better than to believe the nightmare was truly over. David leaned against the rough stone wall, panting heavily. His clothes were torn, stained with dirt and blood, but his eyes burned with resolve. "We did it. The orb's gone. Whatever was controlling those creatures is gone too." Ava lowered her pistol and wiped sweat from her brow. "For now, but that energy, whatever it was, it's not natural. I'm sure it's not the only thing down here." Thomas nodded, gripping his bandaged shoulder. "This place, it's a tomb, a prison for something old and evil. We might have destroyed one part, but the real horror could still be lurking." They gathered their remaining equipment, preparing to ascend back to the surface. The climb was slow and cautious, their bodies aching but driven by the need to survive. As they emerged from the well into the forest, the silence was deafening. The birds were still, the wind had died, and an unnatural stillness hung over the trees. Ava scanned the tree line nervously. "Something's wrong, too quiet." David shook his head. "We're not alone. Whatever was guarding that orb, it's not just down there." Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the forest. Thomas spun around, axe raised, as shadowy figures emerged from the underbrush, human-shaped but twisted, their faces gaunt and eyes glowing faintly red. "They followed us," Thomas growled. "We need to fight." The trio formed a tight circle, backs pressed together as the creatures advanced. David pulled out his knife, Eva reloaded her pistol, and Thomas prepared to swing his axe. The first attacker lunged at David, claws swiping. David dodged, slashing with his knife, but the creature was relentless, blocking and countering with unnatural strength. Eva fired quickly, taking down one creature before it could reach her, but more poured in from all sides. Thomas roared and swung his axe in wide arcs, felling several attackers, but the numbers were overwhelming. David found himself grappling with one of the creatures in close quarters, struggling to break free as it tried to sink its teeth into his neck. He managed to stab the creature in the eye, buying precious seconds. "Fall back," Eva shouted. "We need to regroup." They retreated deeper into the forest, weaving through thick trees and underbrush. The creatures pursued relentlessly, their growls echoing like the howl of the damned. After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing where an old abandoned cabin stood. They hurried inside, barring the door and panting for breath. "Is this some kind of trap?" Eva asked, eyes wide. Thomas shook his head. "No, just a safe spot. For now." David looked around the cabin, noticing strange symbols scratched into the wooden walls. "These markings, they're like the ones in the chamber." Eva frowned. "They must be connected. Whoever or whatever is behind this is marking their territory." Suddenly, a chilling laugh echoed from outside. The door rattled violently as the creature slammed against it. David's heart pounded. "We can't stay here." Thomas grabbed a rusty hunting rifle from the corner. "We fight, or we die." Eva checked her ammo, readying herself. "Let's make this count." The battle inside the cabin was brutal and desperate. Bullets tore through the windows as the creatures attacked with savage fury. Thomas fired shot after shot, each bullet finding a target but not stopping the relentless wave. David fought hand to hand, using broken furniture to fend off attackers. Eva's pistol barked continually, each shot a small beacon of hope. Suddenly, a huge beast broke through the door, snarling wildly. It charged Thomas, knocking him to the ground. David tackled the beast, struggling as it tried to crush him. Eva rushed forward, firing point blank, finally bringing the creature down. Panting and wounded, the survivors regrouped. The dawn was breaking, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. "We can't keep running," David said. "We need to find the source of this evil and end it once and for all." Eva nodded grimly. "Agreed, but we need a plan." Thomas, despite his injuries, managed a grim smile. "Then we prepare, because this fight is far from over." Outside, shadows stirred in the forest. The darkness was watching, waiting, and the nightmare was just beginning. The survivors barely slept that night in the cramped, shadow-filled cabin. Every sound from the surrounding forest kept them on edge. Twigs snapping, leaves rustling, distant howls that seemed to carry a message of impending doom. But dawn was their only hope. David, Eva, and Thomas knew that hiding was no longer an option. The creatures had proven they could track them, could overwhelm them with numbers. If they were to survive, they had to strike back, find the source of the evil, and end it before it consumed them all. "Today, we go deeper," David said quietly as they prepared their gear. His hands trembled slightly, the fatigue and wounds weighing on him. "We have to find the heart of this darkness." Eva packed her pistol, checking the ammo count with practiced precision. "And destroy whatever it is that's controlling those things." Thomas loaded his axe onto his back and tightened the bandages around his shoulder. "We have to be ready for anything. There's no telling what else waits down there." They left the cabin, stepping carefully through the dense undergrowth, the forest growing darker and more menacing with every step. The trees seemed to close in on them, their twisted branches like claws trying to snatch the intruders. Hours passed as they navigated the labyrinthine woods, relying on David's compass and Eva's sharp eyes. Occasionally, strange symbols carved into bark or stones appeared, markings that felt like warnings or traps. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted. The forest floor gave way, and they fell into a hidden pit lined with jagged rocks and thorny vines. David landed hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. Eva and Thomas followed, scrambling to their feet, quickly assessing their injuries. "We're not just being hunted. This place itself is a trap," Eva hissed. Thomas looked around, eyes narrowed. "We need to find a way out, but I don't trust any path here." As they searched, they discovered a narrow tunnel partially hidden by roots and dirt. It descended into darkness, a faint, sickly glow emanating from within. With no choice, they entered the tunnel, weapons drawn, senses alert. The air grew colder, heavier, and the feeling of being watched intensified. The passage twisted and turned, opening occasionally into small caverns filled with ancient relics and bones. The survivors realized they were stepping deeper into the burial ground of some forgotten cult. Suddenly, a guttural growl echoed from the shadows. Shapes emerged, not quite human, not fully beast, with snarling jaws and glowing eyes. David swung his knife, Eva fired her pistol, and Thomas charged with his axe. The battle was brutal, each strike and shot met with a ferocity born of desperation. Eva took a slash across her arm, but managed to shoot down 2 attackers. Thomas crushed a skull with a mighty swing, but another grabbed his leg, pulling him down. David fought furiously, slashing at the beasts' necks, trying to hold them off. His breath was ragged, muscles burning, but he refused to yield. Finally, the creatures retreated, melting back into the shadows. The survivors were battered, bleeding, but alive. Panting, David wiped blood from his face. This is just the beginning. Whatever evil this is, it's guarding its secrets fiercely. Eva nodded, her voice trembling. And it's willing to kill for them. Thomas struggled to his feet, clutching his wounds. We have to keep moving. The source has to be close. They pressed onward, deeper into the darkness, knowing that the real nightmare was still waiting. And they would have to face it, head on. Emerging from the narrow tunnel, the three survivors found themselves in a vast underground chamber. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something far more unsettling. The unmistakable stench of decay. Flickering torches lined the walls, casting long, ominous shadows that danced like specters. David, Eva, and Thomas exchanged wary glances. The chamber's ceiling arched high above them, carved with ancient symbols that pulsed faintly with an eerie blue light. At the center stood an altar, worn by centuries but still menacing, stained with dark, dried blood and etched with cryptic runes. "This must be the source," whispered David, his voice tense. Eva stepped forward cautiously, her pistol drawn. "Whatever's been summoned here, it's ancient and dangerous." Thomas examined the altar, brushing off dust to reveal more symbols. "This looks like a place of sacrifice. Dark ritual." Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the torches. Darkness enveloped them, suffocating and absolute. A low growl echoed from the shadows. Shapes began to emerge. Twisted, hideous forms with gleaming eyes and claws sharp as knives. The survivors braced themselves. David lunged at the nearest creature with his knife, slashing viciously, but the beast was fast, dodging and retaliating with savage blows. Eva fired at the assailants, her bullets tearing through flesh, but more kept coming, relentless. Thomas swung his axe with deadly precision, chopping through limbs and snarling heads. Blood sprayed across the altar, mixing with the ancient stains. The battle was brutal. Each of them fought for survival amid the chaos, their movements fueled by desperation and fear. At one point, Thomas was knocked to the ground, pinned beneath a massive creature. It raised its clawed hand to strike a killing blow. David screamed and drove his knife into the beast's eye, causing it to shriek and release Thomas. Eva, bleeding and trembling, fired the last rounds of her pistol, hitting the creature's weak spots. Slowly, the beasts began to retreat, vanishing into the darkness from which they came. Breathing heavily, the three survivors gathered near the altar. David examined the runes more closely, tracing their shapes with trembling fingers. These inscriptions, they speak of a seal, a binding spell meant to trap something terrible beneath this place, he said. But the seal is weakening. Eva swallowed hard. If that's true, we need to find a way to restore it, or else everything we've faced will be unleashed upon the world. Thomas nodded grimly. We've seen what happens when it's broken. No more mistakes. With renewed purpose, they began searching the chamber, hoping to uncover the secrets needed to reinforce the ancient seal and stop the evil once and for all. The weight of the seal's failure hung heavily over David, Eva, and Thomas as they scoured the vast chamber for clues. The ancient inscriptions hinted at a ritual, one that could renew the binding, but details were sparse and cryptic. Time was running out, and the dark forces beneath the altar were growing restless. Eva traced her fingers along the worn stone walls, searching for anything unusual. Suddenly, her hand brushed against a hidden lever concealed in the carved reliefs. She pulled it instinctively. A grinding noise echoed through the chamber, and the floor beneath them began to shift. Stone slabs slid apart, revealing a staircase spiraling downward into blackness. The three exchanged glances, fear and determination mingling in their eyes. "This is it," Thomas said grimly. "The heart of whatever's trapped below." They descended carefully, torches flickering against the cold stone. The air grew colder with every step, and whispers seemed to echo around them, ghostly voices warning them to turn back. At the bottom, a cavern opened before them, vast and filled with an unnatural darkness. The faint glow of phosphorescent fungi barely illuminated grotesque statues carved from bone and obsidian, depicting twisted figures in agony. David felt a shiver crawl down his spine. This place, it's a tomb. Eva shone her light on the far end, where a massive stone sarcophagus rested on a dais. Strange markings covered its surface, glowing faintly red. Suddenly, a deafening roar shattered the silence. From the shadows emerged a towering entity, an ancient guardian bound to protect the curse. Its eyes burned like molten lava, and its massive form was wrapped in chains, glowing with magical energy. The three drew their weapons, bracing for the fight of their lives. The guardian lunged with terrifying speed. Thomas met the attack head-on, swinging his axe with all his strength. The blade clashed against the guardian's enchanted chains, sparks flying. Eva fired shots aimed at the glowing bindings, hoping to weaken the chain's power. David circled, searching for an opening to strike at the creature's vulnerable spots. The battle was brutal and desperate. The Guardian's strength was overwhelming, but the trio's determination kept them fighting. At a critical moment, David spotted a pulsating gem embedded in the Guardian's chest. "Aim for that!" he shouted. Eva focused her fire, while Thomas distracted the Guardian with fierce blows. David charged forward, plunging his knife deep into the gem. The Guardian howled in agony, its chains snapping as the curse's power began to unravel. With a final roar, it collapsed, the darkness lifting from the cavern. Panting and wounded, the survivors knew their mission was far from over. The curse was weakening, but the evil beneath the earth was not yet defeated. The cavern still echoed with the fading roar of the defeated Guardian as David, Eva, and Thomas caught their breath. Yet the relief was short-lived. A sudden chill swept through the chamber, and a shadow flickered at the edge of their torchlight. David's instincts screamed danger. "We're not alone," he whispered. From the darkness, a figure stepped forward, a man they hadn't seen before, cloaked in tattered robes and eyes gleaming with malevolence. His presence exuded a cold, ruthless power. "You've done well to come this far," the stranger said, voice dripping with mockery. "But this expedition ends here." Eva raised her pistol, hands trembling. "Who are you? What do you want?" The stranger smiled cruelly. "I am the true guardian of the curse, its master and keeper. And you trespassers have disturbed forces beyond your understanding." Before they could react, he unleashed a wave of dark energy, pushing them backward. Thomas lunged, swinging his axe, but the stranger vanished like smoke, reappearing behind Eva. A fierce struggle erupted. Eva fought desperately, ducking and weaving as the stranger's strikes came fast and furious. Thomas and David scrambled to assist, but the stranger's powers were formidable. Amid the chaos, Thomas caught a glimpse of the stranger's true face, an ancient, withered visage etched with hatred and despair. It was clear this foe was no ordinary man. The fight spilled through the cavern, each side trading brutal blows. At one point, David was thrown against the wall, struggling to rise as the stranger loomed over him. But the team's unity held strong. Eva fired precise shots that staggered the stranger. Thomas landed a heavy blow, buying time for David to recover. Seeing an opening, David charged, plunging his dagger deep into the stranger's chest. The man howled in fury, clutching the wound as dark energy spiraled from his body. With a final scream, the stranger dissolved into shadows, leaving behind only a faint echo. Breathing heavily, the trio knew the battle had changed the course of their journey. The curse was no longer just a forgotten evil. It was alive, aware, and fighting back. But in the depths of the cave, a new danger stirred, something ancient and more terrifying than any they had faced. The dust had barely settled from the last confrontation when the trio pressed deeper into the labyrinthine cave. The atmosphere was thick, not just with humidity, but with an ancient dread. Their flashlights flickered, the walls now etched with bizarre carvings, spirals, eyes, teeth, all arranged in patterns that seemed to shift when not directly observed. "This is something else entirely," Eva whispered, tracing one spiral with her gloved fingers. This isn't just a tomb. It's a temple. David nodded grimly. And temples are built for worship or sacrifice. As they walked further, the tunnel opened into a massive subterranean chamber. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, lost in darkness. At its center was a circular stone platform, cracked and blackened, surrounded by obsidian spires. Around it stood statues of grotesque humanoid figures, half human, half beast, each in a posture of agony or devotion. The group approached the altar cautiously. Thomas muttered, "This gives me a really bad feeling." Suddenly, the torches flared. A voice boomed, not from around them, but within them. It echoed inside their skulls like a bell tolling at the bottom of the sea. "You have trespassed. You have awakened the silence." David clutched his head in pain. "Make it stop!" Then the stone floor beneath the altar began to tremble and part. From the black fissure emerged not a beast, but a sensation, like despair given form. It poured from the crack like smoke and began to take shape. Long limbs, eyeless face, hundreds of fingers twitching as if seeking memories to steal. Eva fired at it reflexively, but the bullets passed through harmlessly. The being let out a breath that extinguished all flame, plunging the chamber into utter darkness. Screaming filled the blackness. Not just the teams, but the voices of others, of the long dead, trapped here for eternity. Thomas swung his axe wildly. Something caught his arm. Cold. Wet. Like the fingers of a child submerged in ice. He cried out and fell back. The thing surged forward, wrapping itself around him. David tackled it, slashing with his blade. Eva relit a flare and threw it, briefly illuminating the creature. Its skin looked like stitched-together shadows. It shrieked, backing away, but not far. Then the statues began to move. One by one, the beast men around the altar cracked from their stillness. They turned their heads, mouths opening in silent screams. Their bones snapped, their forms corrupted further as they lunged at the trio. "We need to destroy the altar," Eva shouted. David and Thomas took hammers from their packs. They fought back the creatures while Eva climbed the altar and began smashing the runes with the butt of her rifle. Each hit echoed like thunder. The creatures howled and recoiled. Finally, with one massive strike, Thomas cracked the center of the altar. A blinding light burst forth, and the shadow being screamed as it was sucked into the crack, along with its minions. The statues froze, then crumbled into ash. The chamber fell still. Breathing hard, the team looked at one another. The horror had passed. For now. But as they turned to leave, Eva noticed something scrawled in blood across the back of the altar. "The Forgotten One stirs. He waits." The air outside the cave felt different. The trio emerged into the daylight, but the sun was pale, veiled in a strange mist. The trees around the mountain were not as they remembered. Their leaves were blackened, their trunks twisted unnaturally. The birds had gone silent. "We weren't gone that long," David muttered, checking his watch. It was dead, its hands frozen. His phone, too, was lifeless. Eva's compass spun in frantic circles. Thomas scanned the tree line. "Something's wrong. The forest, it's watching us." They descended the slope, wary. Every step was accompanied by a whisper. Soft, like rustling leaves, yet distinctly human. "You hear that?" Eva asked, raising her rifle. David nodded. "It's saying our names." Indeed, the voices drifted through the trees, barely audible. "David, Eva, Thomas." The forest had come alive, not with wildlife, but with memory. Shadows flitted between the branches. Occasionally they caught glimpses of people, at least what looked like people. A woman in a white dress floated between trees. A boy with no eyes stood beneath a dead oak. Faces they had seen before, and some they hadn't. "The cursed victims," Thomas whispered, "trapped between here and whatever hell this is." They pressed on, hoping to escape the cursed grove. But the forest had no end. Their path curved back on itself. They marked trees with red chalk, only to find the marks vanish seconds later. "We're being toyed with," Eva growled. "It's like a maze." Then the trees began to shift. Literally. Roots twisted, trunks creaked and moved, forcing the group into a narrow path. They tried to fight it, but the forest was too strong. It corralled them like cattle into a clearing with a single, massive tree at its center. It was ancient. Its bark split like scars, its roots like veins sprawled across the earth. Hanging from its limbs were corpses, hundreds of them swaying silently in the windless air. Each one had their eyes gouged out, and yet they seemed to look at them. A whisper louder than the rest crawled up their spines. The forest remembers. Suddenly, the bodies began to twitch, then scream. Dozens of dead, eyeless husks dropped from the tree and charged on all fours, teeth gnashing, fingernails like knives. "Run!" Thomas bellowed. They fought their way back through the trees, but the forest resisted. Roots tripped them, branches slashed. One of the corpses grabbed Eva's leg. She shot it point blank, its head bursting like fruit. David pulled her up. "Keep moving." They reached a shallow river, its water black as oil. Across it, the forest changed. Normal trees, sunlight, birdsong. Safety. But something blocked their path. A tall, robed figure stood in the middle of the stream. Its face was hidden beneath a bark mask. From its hands dripped black sap. In its other hand was a staff of twisted bone. Thomas raised his axe. "Move." The figure didn't speak. It simply raised its staff and plunged it into the ground. The water turned to blood. The sky darkened. Then it attacked. The figure moved with impossible speed. Thomas barely parried its strike, his axe clanging against the staff. Eva circled, trying to find an opening. David fired, but bullets ricocheted off an invisible shield. The masked figure grabbed Thomas by the throat and lifted him. Sap dripped onto his skin, burning like acid. Thomas screamed and drove his axe into its chest. The creature shrieked and dropped him. Eva didn't hesitate. She jammed a flare into its face. The bark mask caught fire. It screamed in a voice not of this world. David charged with his machete and severed its arm. It stumbled, then collapsed into the stream. The blood water boiled and swallowed it. The sun broke through. The river cleared. The birds sang again. They crossed, bruised, burnt, but alive. Eva looked back once. The forest behind them was still, but she could still hear it. Whispers. Always whispering. The sun followed them as they left the whispering forest, but its warmth felt artificial, like a spotlight rather than salvation. The trio walked in silence, nursing their wounds, physical and mental. Ahead lay a valley. Nestled in its heart was a village. David stopped. "That's not on the map." The village was old, stone cottages covered in moss, roofs partially collapsed. Smoke curled from one chimney, but the rest of the place seemed abandoned. A stone archway marked the entrance, overgrown with vines and carved with Latin text. Eva read aloud, "Oblivioni reditur." Return to oblivion. Thomas tightened his grip on the axe. "We go together, and no splitting up." They stepped into the village. The silence here was different. Not oppressive like the forest, but still wrong. Windows stared like blind eyes. The streets were dusty, but no footprints. Even the wind seemed to avoid this place. Then they saw him. A man stood at the well in the center of the square. Pale, barefoot, wearing tattered robes. His eyes were milky white. He didn't blink. Eva called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The man slowly turned, and a smile spread across his face, unnaturally wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Then he began to bleed. From his eyes, nose, mouth. David stepped forward cautiously. "Sir," the man collapsed like a puppet cut from strings. They rushed to him, but as David knelt, the man's body evaporated into ash, scattering into the wind. "What the hell is going on here?" Eva whispered. Suddenly bells rang. Church bells. They turned toward the church at the edge of the village. Its steeple leaned dangerously, yet the bell tolled with rhythm. Someone or something was inside. They approached slowly. The church door was ajar. Inside, candles were lit, though no one was visible. A chill seeped from the walls. On the altar was a book. It pulsed with a faint red glow. David stepped forward. This is the source. I can feel it. Ava held him back. Don't touch it. We don't know what it... But David was already flipping it open. The pages turned themselves. Then, screaming. Not in the room, but inside their heads. The book released a psychic wave of anguish. Thousands of voices, all crying, begging, accusing. Ava dropped to her knees. Thomas staggered. David stood frozen, eyes wide. Images flashed in their minds. The witch's execution, the rituals in the house, the black-eyed children, the forest of the dead. Then, a house. The house, surrounded by flames. Thomas pushed forward and slammed the book shut. The room fell silent, breathless. They stared at each other. That book, David whispered. It's the key. It's the record of everything, every curse, every soul bound to this place. Eva wiped blood from her nose. Then we destroy it. She poured gasoline from her pack over the book. Thomas struck a flare. The flames caught instantly. The church shook. Screams echoed from the walls. Windows shattered. The floor cracked open, revealing blackness below. They ran. The entire village began to collapse. Roofs caved in. The well exploded. The sky turned red. They didn't stop until they reached the top of the valley. There, they turned and saw the village implode, vanishing into dust. Only the archway remained, now cracked and crumbling. David dropped to his knees. Is it over? Eva looked at the smoldering ruins. No, that was only a fragment. Thomas stared into the distance. The house still stands. We saw it. In the vision. Surrounded by fire. Eva nodded. Then that's where we go next. The heart of the curse. And so they moved on, toward the house where it all began. The ground was scorched as they approached. Ash floated in the air like black snow. The forest had thinned, revealing a hill where fire once raged. Atop that hill, silhouetted against a smoldering sky, stood the house. David's breath caught in his throat. It's real, Ava nodded. Just like in the vision, the heart of it all. The house was ancient, larger than they'd remembered. Its wooden frame was charred in places, but somehow still stood. Defiant, waiting. Vines wrapped around the lower windows. Every shutter was closed. The porch sagged like a tired mouth. They stepped onto the path. With each step, the air thickened. Not with heat, but with memories. Whispers followed them. Familiar voices from past chapters. The girl in the mirror, the priest who vanished, the children in the attic. All voices came here to die. Thomas kicked open the door. Inside, time had frozen. Furniture was covered in dusty sheets. Candles lined the walls, though unlit. The floorboards groaned under their weight. And in the center of the main room stood a spiral staircase, descending into the earth. The basement, David murmured. The source. No rushing in, Ava warned. We've seen what this place can do. They descended slowly. With each step, the cold grew sharper. At the bottom, they entered a stone chamber, circular, ancient. Symbols were etched into the walls, pulsing faintly with red light. In the center, an altar. On it, a mirror. Not just any mirror. The mirror. The one from the beginning. From the seance. From the dream. Its surface was black, liquid-like, and shimmered with its own inner light. Thomas stepped forward and reached for it. David grabbed his arm. Don't. This is it. This is the curse. Suddenly, the mirror rippled. From it emerged a figure. Tall, skeletal, its face an ever-shifting mask of every soul they'd encountered. The girl, the mother, the priest, the children, the man at the well, All of them? The entity spoke with thousands of voices. You trespass on sacred rot. You fed me. You opened the gates. Eva stepped forward, unwavering. And now we close them. She raised the dagger they'd taken from the church. The blade glowed as it neared the mirror. The entity shrieked. The walls shook. Cracks spidered across the mirror's surface. Thomas and David joined her, chanting the words from the church's book, words in a lost language. The mirror howled. Darkness poured from it like ink, flooding the chamber. Then, shatter, the mirror exploded. Light consumed everything. They awoke outside, flat on the scorched earth, beneath a clean sky. The house was gone. Not collapsed. Gone. Not a splinter remained. Eva sat up first. Is it over? David scanned the horizon. No voices, no shadow, no cold. Thomas stood slowly. We broke it. They embraced, speechless. Then, distant thunder. They turned to see a storm rising over the next hill. Not natural, not clouds. Smoke. And in it, another house. Similar. Twisted. Waiting. David exhaled. The curse was never in one house. Eva nodded. It's a pattern, a chain. Thomas clenched his fists. Then we break them, all of them, and they walked toward the next shadow. They reached the new house before nightfall. It stood crooked on a foundation of ash. Not wood, not brick, ash. The very ground rejected it, yet it clung to the hillside like a wound that refused to close. Lightning forked above it, but no thunder followed. A dead silence, as if the world itself held its breath. This one's different, Eva said. David nodded grimly. It's not just the next in the chain. It's the last one. Thomas stepped forward, holding the last page of the priest's book. Then we end this. Once and for all. The front door opened on its own. No creak, no wind, just an invitation. They entered. Inside, the walls pulsed with veins. Dark, wet, twitching like living things. Shadows moved independently of light, and from somewhere deep inside came the unmistakable sound of breathing. This house is alive, David whispered. No, Eva corrected. It's becoming. At the heart of the house, they found a cradle, not wooden, but formed from twisted bone and sinew. In it, something stirred. A child, pale, eyeless, and whispering in a forgotten tongue. It's the seed, Thomas said. The curse reborn. They realized the truth then. Destroying the mirror had shattered the vessel, but not the source. The curse had fled into the world, into the cracks, and grown. And now it was infantile, vulnerable. This was their only chance. Eva took the dagger. It glowed gold, humming with holy power. She stepped toward the cradle. The house screamed. Walls bled. The floor collapsed in places. Ghosts clawed from the windows, faces they'd seen before. The girl, the mother, the boy in the well. They begged, pleaded, but Eva didn't stop. She raised the dagger and plunged it into the cradle. A silence deeper than death fell. Then the house folded inward, collapsing like paper soaked in flame. A shock wave of light erupted, tossing them into the trees. The earth shuddered, and from beneath the house rose a howl, a cry of 1,000 broken spirits finding peace. Then stillness. No fire, no ruin. Nothing remained. Only a field of wildflowers where the house had stood. 6 months later, the town rebuilt. The fog never returned. Children laughed again in the streets. Birds sang without fear. And in the church, where the mirror once rested, a new altar was placed. Bare, simple, but blessed. David opened a small bookstore. Eva became a teacher, sharing her knowledge of folklore and truth. Thomas wandered. Quiet, thoughtful. The kind of peace that comes after fire. One afternoon, as the sun set over the hills, they met again. David held out a small journal. Wrote it all down, every part. Eva smiled. Someone has to remember. Thomas looked at the horizon. Do you hear it? They fell silent. No breathing walls, no whispering winds, only wind through trees, children's laughter, and peace. But far off, in the forest beyond the hills, a crow cawed, and a door creaked open. Eva stood at the edge of the lake, its surface still and black like obsidian under the grey morning sky. A faint mist rolled over the water, twisting like fingers across the silent forest. It had been 2 years since she last saw the mirror, or what remained of it. But the dreams had returned. At first, they were only fragments, whispers, a distant reflection of something she couldn't quite place. But last night, it spoke. "You left me broken, but I'm whole again," the voice had whispered from the darkness in her dream. She had woken up screaming, drenched in sweat, clutching the pendant Thomas gave her before he died. The pendant had turned ice cold. Eva had rebuilt her life in the Austrian countryside, a small cottage in the hills. No mirrors, no glass windows, nothing that could reflect. But in the last week, she had begun seeing things in puddles, in polished silverware, in her tea. First just shadows, then faces. Now the masked figure had returned. It wasn't human. It never was. The mask was bone white, cracked down the center, its body shrouded in tattered robes that swayed though there was no wind. And always, always, the sound of wet breathing. Last night, she had found muddy footprints in her kitchen, bare, human-shaped, leading to the cupboard where she kept the old mirror shard, locked in a wooden box wrapped in salt and silver wire. The box had been opened, and inside, the shard was gone. Eva contacted the only person she could trust. David. He had changed. His voice on the phone was low, hesitant. "I thought we buried this." "We did," she whispered, "but something dug it up." They agreed to meet in Salzburg in 2 days. That night, the dreams worsened. This time, she wasn't just dreaming. She was there, in a corridor of flickering torches, walls made of pulsing flesh. Mirrors lined the walls, but none reflected her face. Instead, each showed someone else, screaming, burning, drowning. She ran through the hall, and the sound of hundreds of whispering voices filled her ears. "Find the second, find the true face, find the gate." Then she saw herself, another Eva, standing inside one of the mirrors, eyes black, blood running from her nose. The other Eva lifted her hand and pointed. Behind her, Eva turned. The masked figure stood inches from her. Its voice dripped like oil. "It's not over, child. He wants his soul back." She woke up, gasping. Her window was open, though she had locked it. And on her wall, written in condensation, were 4 words. "The hollow circle call." The train to Salzburg groaned along the tracks like a wounded beast. Eva sat by the window, watching the cold countryside blur past. Her hands trembled slightly. In her coat pocket was a knife, a curved, ceremonial blade she had sworn never to touch again. David would know what to do. He always had. But something deep inside her whispered that even he might not be enough this time. She felt it again, the sensation of being watched, not by a person, but by something older, hungrier. The masked figure hadn't returned since the dream, but something else had. At Salzburg station, David was waiting under the shadow of the old clock tower. He looked older, grayer, worn thin. The moment he saw Eva, he pulled her into a tight hug, as if to confirm she was real. "I've been seeing signs, too," he muttered. "Dead birds near my door. Blood on my mirror. They're back." Eva didn't ask who they were. She already knew. The collectors. In the old texts, they were described as soul harvesters, ancient entities bound to reflections. They didn't kill for fun. They reclaimed what was owed. If someone tampered with the mirror of thorns, the collectors were sent to restore balance, violently. And 2 years ago, they had taken Thomas. David led Eva to a safe house in the heart of the city, a basement beneath a burned-down church. The walls were lined with salt circles, symbols drawn in ash, and dozens of black candles. "They can't enter here," he said. "For now." Eva placed the pendant on the table. "The mirror shard is missing." David went pale. "Then we don't have much time." That night they began the ritual, not to summon, but to listen. They used a bowl of black water, obsidian dust, and hair from the last person killed by the mirror, kept in a vial sealed with wax. David chanted in Latin. Eva felt the room grow colder. Then something moved inside the water, a face, mouth open, screaming, bleeding. The water boiled suddenly, and a shriek echoed across the basement. The candles went out, and the symbols on the wall began to bleed. David stumbled back. "They found us." Then came the scratching. From above, dozens of sharp claws dragging across stone. Eva grabbed her blade. "How many?" David looked up, his voice hollow. "3, maybe 4. The basement door buckled under something massive. Wood cracked. Dust fell from the ceiling. A collector had arrived. Eva remembered the rules. Don't run, don't scream, never look at their faces. David poured salt at the doorway, forming a fresh line, but a skeletal hand burst through the wood, scattering it. Black smoke poured into the room. It wasn't fire. It was them. Eva stood still, heart pounding. One by one, they stepped into the candlelight. Tall, hooded, skin like burnt parchment, and no eyes, just bleeding sockets where faces should have been. But their masks were worse. Ornate bone masks carved with names, hundreds of names, of those they had collected. David raised his hand in defiance. "By the binding of flesh and shadow, I command." The nearest collector hissed and lunged, tearing through David's chest like paper. Blood sprayed across the altar. Eva screamed and swung the blade. It sliced through the air and through the collector's side. It howled. It felt pain. They weren't gods. Not anymore. Eva didn't run. She fought. The blade burned in her grip, glowing with ancient runes. As the second collector advanced, she cut across its chest, ripping the robes. It staggered, black ichor pouring from the wound. But they didn't stop. Another lunged. She rolled aside, slashing upward. Bone cracked. Suddenly, silence. Only 2 remained, standing in the shadows, watching. And then, as if answering a silent call, they vanished into ash. The room fell quiet. Eva crawled to David. His eyes were already glassy. He clutched her hand one last time. "Find the second mirror," he whispered. "Before he does." Then he was gone. The morning light in Salzburg was deceptively calm. Eva sat alone at a small cafe table, nursing a bitter black coffee, her mind racing with David's last words. The second mirror. It was the key, the only way to stop the nightmare. But where? She unfolded a crumpled map David had given her the night before, marked with strange symbols and cryptic notes. At its center was a place called Schloss Hohenfels, an ancient castle deep in the Bavarian Alps. No one had lived there for decades. Stories told of madness, disappearances, and worse. The perfect place to hide something so dangerous. Eva's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "They're watching. You're not safe. Leave now." She clenched her fists. No time for fear. That night, Eva took the night train to Munich, then rented a car to drive into the mountains. The road twisted like a serpent, the air growing colder and thinner with every mile. The castle emerged suddenly, looming above the mist like a dark gourd. Its walls were cracked, ivy strangling the stone, windows shattered. Inside, the air smelled of decay and forgotten secrets. Eva's flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing faded tapestries and broken suits of armor. She moved cautiously, her heart pounding. The mirror must be here. Then, from the shadows, came the whisper, "You should not be here." Eva spun around. A man stepped into the light, tall, gaunt, with eyes like burning coals. His smile was cruel. "Welcome to Hohenfels. I am Magnus." Magnus was no ordinary man. He was the last guardian of the mirrors, a cultist bound to protect their terrible power at any cost. He moved with unnatural grace, pulling a dagger etched with runes. You seek the mirror? You will find only death. Eva raised her knife, the ceremonial blade glowing faintly. I'm not afraid. They circled each other in the great hall, shadows dancing on cracked stone. Magnus lunged first, swift as a viper. Eva dodged, feeling the dagger scrape her shoulder. Pain flared. She retaliated, slashing at his arm. He snarled, pressing harder. The fight was brutal. Each strike echoed through the empty halls. At one point, Magnus slammed Eva against a pillar. She gasped, nearly losing consciousness, but her grip tightened on the blade. With a desperate twist, she cut through his wrist. Blood sprayed. Magnus staggered back, clutching the wound. Eva took her chance. She ran toward the throne room. There, on a pedestal, stood a large, cracked mirror framed with thorns. The second mirror. But the mirror was alive. It shimmered, the glass rippling like water. Eva felt a presence behind her. Magnus, furious but bleeding, charged again. She barely dodged the shards of broken glass as the mirror shattered in a wave of dark energy. The room trembled. Eva reached out, grabbing a shard glowing with unnatural light. Visions flooded her mind. Memories, faces, whispers of those trapped within. She saw Thomas, and then a warning. The mirrors were linked. Breaking one only unleashed the others. She had to destroy them all. Magnus smiled bitterly. You can't win. The mirrors are eternal. Eva tightened her grip. This ends now. The moment Eva shattered the second mirror, the castle seemed to come alive with a terrible force. The shards in her hand pulsed with unnatural energy, whispering secrets and screams of the trapped souls. But something else stirred in the depths. The walls trembled, dust falling like rain. Eva's breath came fast. She knew Magnus's warning was true. Breaking one mirror did not end the curse. It unleashed the others. Suddenly, a chilling howl echoed through the halls. Dark shapes twisted and formed out of the shadows. Monstrous figures with eyes burning red, their bodies shifting like smoke and stone. Eva barely had time to raise her knife before one of the creatures lunged at her. She fought with everything she had, slashing and dodging, the creature's claws raking across her arm. Pain exploded, but she refused to fall. Behind her, the castle doors slammed shut, trapping her inside. The shadows multiplied, encircling her like vultures. Eva backed into a corner, breath ragged, heart pounding like a war drum. The creatures howled, closing in. Then, in the distance, a gunshot cracked the silence. A figure appeared. Lucas. His eyes wild but determined. He fired again and again, scattering the creatures with bursts of silver bullets that glowed faintly. Eva, we need to get out, now, he shouted. Together, they ran through the twisting corridors, the castle shaking as if alive and enraged. But the shadows pursued, relentless. In the final hallway, Eva was nearly overwhelmed when Lucas threw himself at the nearest creature, his body taking the fatal blow. Go, he gasped, blood flowing. Eva hesitated, then sprinted toward the exit, the echoes of Lucas's sacrifice burning in her mind. She burst through the heavy doors into the freezing night air. Behind her, the castle seemed to roar in fury as the darkness withdrew. For now, Eva held the shards tight, knowing the battle was far from over. Eva barely escaped the wrath of the shadow creatures, her mind racing with fear and determination. The castle was no longer just a place of ancient secrets. It had become a battlefield where survival meant facing horrors beyond imagination. As dawn's pale light seeped through cracked windows, Eva found herself in the castle's oldest wing. The walls, once regal and ornate, were now cracked and faded, covered with strange symbols that seemed to pulse faintly. She clutched the mirror shards tightly, feeling the restless energy thrumming within them. The voices she had heard earlier now grew louder, whispering in a language she did not understand, a language that seemed older than time. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the corridor, and the shadows danced along the walls. Eva's skin prickled. She wasn't alone. From the darkness, a figure emerged, thin, pale, with eyes like hollow pits. "I am the Keeper," the figure whispered, voice like a dying wind. "You seek to break the curse, but you do not know the price." Ava tightened her grip. "Tell me, I have to end this." The Keeper's gaze pierced her soul. "The mirrors are bound by ancient blood. Each shard holds a fragment of suffering and death. To break the curse, you must gather all shards and face the one who created the darkness." Ava swallowed her fear. "Where do I find them?" "In the heart of the castle," the Keeper said, fading into the shadows. "But beware, not all who enter return." Determined, Eva pressed forward, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Every step was a test. The castle seemed to shift and twist, trying to trap her in a maze of nightmares. Suddenly, a low growl broke the silence. From the shadows, a massive beast lunged, its fur matted, eyes glowing with malice. Ava barely dodged, grabbing a broken piece of wood to defend herself. The creature attacked relentlessly, teeth snapping inches from her face. She fought with desperation, using every ounce of strength to drive the beast back. With a final strike, she plunged the shard into the beast's eye. It howled in pain, then collapsed into a lifeless heap. Breathing hard, Eva knew this was only the beginning. The castle's darkness was alive, and it wanted her to fail. But she would not give up. She had to find the remaining shards and stop the curse before it consumed them all. Eva's pulse hammered in her chest as she ventured deeper into the castle's heart. The air grew colder, heavier, saturated with a dark energy that seemed to twist reality itself. The walls whispered, and the shadows stretched longer, as if alive and watching. The mirror shards pulsed with increasing intensity in her palm, guiding her toward a massive iron door, covered with ancient runes, glowing a sickly green. The final chamber, the source of the curse. As she reached out, the door shuddered violently, and an agonized roar echoed from within. Eva steeled herself and pushed the door open. Inside was a chamber larger than any she had seen, filled with twisting black vines that writhed like living things. At the center stood a dark figure cloaked in shadows, its eyes burning with malevolent fire. "You dare come to the heart of my domain," the voice hissed. "You will pay with your soul." Eva raised the shards, their combined light clashing with the darkness. The figure lunged, and the battle began. A desperate struggle between light and shadow. The dark figure struck with deadly precision, its claws slashing through the air. Eva dodged and countered, the shards radiating blinding light with each clash. The chamber trembled as their fight unleashed a storm of energy. Eva's muscles screamed, but she refused to yield, drawing strength from the memories of her lost friends. She fought harder. The figure snarled, its form flickering as the shards chipped away at the darkness. With a final, defiant cry, Eva plunged the mirror shards into the figure's heart. A scream tore through the chamber as the darkness shattered and dissolved. The vines withered, the runes dimmed, and the oppressive weight lifted. Eva collapsed, exhausted but victorious. The curse was broken. As the first light of dawn bathed the castle ruins, Eva felt the presence of her fallen comrades surround her, a silent, eternal gratitude. She stepped outside, free at last from the nightmare. But the castle's secrets would live on in whispers, warning any who dared to follow. The first light of dawn barely penetrated the thick mist surrounding the ruined castle. Eva stumbled outside, her body aching, but her spirit unbroken. Yet the eerie silence was shattered by distant whispers carried by the cold wind, faint voices warning her to leave or suffer the same fate as the others. As she moved through the ruins, Eva's eyes caught movement, shadowy figures lurking just beyond the veil of mist. They were the lost souls of the cursed expedition, trapped in an endless limbo, forever bound to the place of their demise. Eva's heart pounded. She knew that breaking the curse had not freed everyone. These spirits were tormented, their anguish anchoring them to this forsaken land. Suddenly, a chilling wail pierced the air. From the mist emerged one of the shadows, a twisted figure resembling Marcus, her lost friend, but his eyes burned with hatred and sorrow. "You brought ruin," he hissed, "and now you must join us." Ava backed away, clutching the mirror shards tightly. The shadow lunged, but she was ready. With a flash of light, she shattered the apparition, scattering it into the mist. One by one, the shadows appeared, each a fragment of the expedition's tragic past. Eva fought fiercely, the shards glowing brighter with every spirit vanquished. But the battle was exhausting, and the spirits' numbers seemed endless. Just as hope began to fade, Eva spotted a glowing altar beneath an ancient tree. She raced toward it, the spirits close behind. Placing the shards on the altar, she whispered a prayer, invoking a light to guide the lost souls home. A brilliant radiance erupted, engulfing the ruins. The shadows screamed, dissolving into the mist as peace slowly returned. Exhausted but triumphant, Eva knew her journey was far from over. But for now, the curse was truly broken. The ruins had fallen silent after the fierce confrontation, but Eva knew that the echoes of the past still haunted the land. She wandered deeper into the forest surrounding the castle, driven by a nagging feeling that the source of the curse was not yet revealed. The trees grew thicker, their gnarled branches intertwining like skeletal fingers blocking the sky. Strange symbols, carved into the bark, glowed faintly under her torchlight. Eva traced them carefully, recognizing ancient runes she had seen in old texts. Runes of binding and imprisonment. Her heart pounded as she followed the trail, stepping carefully over roots and fallen leaves. Suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled, and a deep growl echoed through the trees. From the shadows, a massive beast emerged, its eyes glowing amber, its fur matted with dirt and blood. The creature was unlike anything Eva had ever seen, a twisted hybrid of wolf and something far more sinister. She raised her dagger, the only weapon she had left. The beast charged, jaws snapping. Eva dodged and slashed, each blow narrowly missing the lethal strike. The fight was brutal, the beast's strength overwhelming. With a desperate cry, Eva lunged forward, plunging her dagger into the creature's throat. It howled in agony, staggering backward before collapsing into the underbrush. Breathing heavily, Eva realized this beast was a guardian, an ancient sentinel cursed to protect the secrets buried beneath the castle. Her victory was bittersweet. The fight had drained her, but it had also brought her closer to the truth. She pressed onward, uncovering an underground chamber hidden beneath twisted roots. The air inside was thick with decay, and the walls were covered in cryptic markings, warnings left by those who had come before. Eva's fingers trembled as she traced the final symbol, a seal that bound the darkness deep within the earth. To break the curse, she would have to destroy this seal, but doing so would awaken something far worse. The choice weighed heavily on her, risk awakening an ancient evil or leave the curse to claim more lives. But Eva knew she could not turn back now. Eva stood before the ancient seal, the weight of her decision pressing heavily on her shoulders. The air was thick with silence, broken only by her shallow breaths and the faint rustling of unseen creatures deep underground. With trembling hands, she traced the runes once more, whispering the incantation she had painstakingly translated from the cursed manuscripts. A low hum resonated through the chamber, growing louder until the very ground began to shake. Suddenly, a blinding light burst from the seal, and a deafening roar echoed through the catacombs. Shadows twisted and writhed, forming into a colossal figure cloaked in darkness, an ancient evil long imprisoned. Eva barely had time to react before the monstrous entity lunged at her, claws slashing through the stale air. She dodged, rolling to the side, her dagger flashing as she struck at the beast's tendrils of shadow. The fight was desperate and chaotic. Each blow Eva delivered was met with a retaliatory strike, the creature's power fueled by centuries of rage. The chamber trembled, dust and debris falling around them like a storm. Eva's mind raced, how to defeat something born from darkness itself. She realized that brute force alone would not be enough. She needed to outsmart the evil, to find its weakness. Recalling an ancient legend, Ava remembered that such creatures were bound to the source of their power, the seal she had broken. She began to chant another incantation, focusing all her energy on reversing the ritual. The beast shrieked in fury, striking wildly as Ava's voice grew stronger. With a final surge, she completed the chant, and a beam of pure light shot from her hands, piercing the darkness. The entity howled, shrinking and dissolving into nothingness. The ground stilled, and the oppressive weight lifted from the chamber. Exhausted but victorious, Ava collapsed to her knees. The curse was broken, the evil banished. For now, as she emerged from the underground chamber, the first rays of dawn pierced the forest canopy. The air felt lighter, the haunting silence replaced by the gentle songs of birds. Ava knew this was not the end, but a new beginning. The forest, the castle, and its secrets would live on. But now, hope had returned. The morning sun filtered weakly through the dense foliage as Ava led the remaining survivors deeper into the ancient forest surrounding the cursed castle. The air was crisp but heavy, with an unsettling stillness, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Their steps grew cautious. The whispers of the forest seemed to guide them, pushing and pulling at the edges of their sanity. Suddenly, Ava halted, her eyes fixed on a barely visible crack in the moss-covered stone wall. "This must be it," she whispered. The hidden passage the legend spoke of. Using her knife, she carefully chipped away at the moss until a loose stone slid aside, revealing a narrow tunnel dark as midnight. Without hesitation, the group slipped inside, the walls closing in as they descended. Every sound was amplified, their heartbeat pounding in their ears, the scrape of their boots against the stone floor. Deeper and deeper they ventured, the air growing colder, a dampness seeping into their clothes. At the tunnel's end, an ancient door barred their way, covered in sinister symbols glowing faintly in the gloom. Ava studied the markings and began to trace her fingers over them. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a low growl emanated from beyond the door. From the shadows, monstrous figures emerged, guardian spirits bound to protect the secrets within. They snarled, claws gleaming, and lunged at the explorers. The group scattered, weapons drawn as chaos erupted. Ava fought with desperate ferocity, her dagger flashing under the dim light. Each clash echoed through the tunnel as she parried blows and struck back, feeling the cold breath of death near. One by one, her comrades fell, dragged into the darkness, their screams swallowed by the cavern's depths. Ava's heart hammered, but she pressed on, driven by the need to survive and unravel the mystery. With a final burst of strength, she forced the door open and stepped inside a vast chamber. The air was thick with ancient magic, and at its center stood a pedestal holding an ominous, glowing artifact. Ava approached cautiously, aware that this object held the key to ending the curse, but also the danger of awakening even darker forces. Ava stood before the glowing artifact, a twisted orb pulsating with dark energy. Her fingers trembled as she reached out, feeling the cold aura radiate from its surface. The air around her seemed to thicken, whispers echoing in a language long forgotten. Memories flashed through her mind, visions of past explorers consumed by the artifact's power, their souls trapped in eternal torment. The warning was clear. To take it was to invite destruction. But Ava knew the fate of the cursed castle, and the forest depended on this moment. With a deep breath, she grasped the orb. Instantly, a shock wave of energy burst forth, throwing her backward. The chamber trembled violently, cracks forming in the ancient stone walls. From the shadows, the guardian spirits appeared once more, their rage intensified by Ava's defiance. They charged, their forms shifting between spectral and monstrous, claws ripping through the air. Ava fought desperately, using the orb's energy to shield herself. Each strike from the spirits was met with bursts of light as the artifact pulsed in her hand. The battle was brutal and relentless. Ava's strength waned, but her resolve did not falter. Summoning every ounce of willpower, she called upon the orb's power to banish the spirits. A blinding flash engulfed the chamber. When the light faded, the spirits were gone, the oppressive darkness lifting like a heavy veil. Exhausted but victorious, Ava knew her journey was far from over. The artifact held the secret to breaking the curse, but only if she could unlock its mysteries without succumbing to its deadly influence. Ava cautiously stepped into the narrow passage revealed behind the collapsing wall. The air was damp and cold, thick with the scent of earth and ancient stone. The faint flicker of her torch barely pierced the dense darkness that swallowed her whole. As she moved deeper, the walls seemed to close in, the passage twisting and turning like the coils of a serpent. Strange carvings adorned the stones, symbols that pulsed faintly with a crimson light. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the shadows. Ava froze, heart pounding. From the gloom, a grotesque figure lunged, a monstrous beast with glowing eyes and jagged claws, snarling fiercely. Instinctively, Ava raised her torch, slashing at the creature's face. It recoiled, but quickly attacked again. A desperate struggle ensued, the beast's strength threatening to overpower her. Ava dodged a brutal swipe, retaliating with a swift blow to its ribs. The beast howled, staggering back into the shadows. Breathing heavily, Ava pressed forward, determined not to be stopped. The passage opened into a cavern, illuminated by a strange phosphorescent glow. In the center lay a cracked altar, covered with the same red symbols from the walls. Ava approached cautiously. Suddenly, the ground trembled. From beneath the altar, spectral hands burst forth, grasping for her ankles. She kicked and fought, breaking free just as the cavern ceiling began to collapse. Racing through the crumbling passage, Ava barely escaped the deadly trap. Outside, she paused, heart hammering. The hidden passage was more dangerous than she had imagined, but it held the key to the final mystery of the cursed castle. Ava stepped cautiously into the chamber beyond the hidden passage. The room was shrouded in darkness, but faint whispers echoed around her, swirling like a sinister breeze. The walls seemed to breathe, shadows dancing in impossible shapes. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, forming words in a forgotten tongue. Ava's skin prickled with unease. The shadows thickened, coalescing into humanoid forms, dark figures with glowing eyes that watched her every move. One shadow lunged forward, claws extended. Ava barely dodged, scrambling backward. She grabbed a broken piece of wood from the floor and swung fiercely. The shadow hissed and recoiled, but more emerged, surrounding her. Her heart pounded, adrenaline flooding her veins. With no escape in sight, Ava fought desperately. She smashed the nearest shadow with the wooden shard, but others clawed at her, cold and relentless. The whispers turned into a deafening roar as the shadows attacked in a frenzy. Ava's vision blurred, pain searing through her arms. Yet she refused to surrender. Summoning all her strength, she chanted a prayer she'd learned from an old manuscript, a plea for light and protection. A radiant glow erupted from her hands, searing the shadows and forcing them back. The whispers ceased, the shadows dissolved, and silence returned. Gasping for breath, Ava knew this victory was only temporary. The castle's darkness still lingered, waiting to strike again. Ava pressed onward, her steps echoing softly through the ancient corridors. Suddenly, a towering figure emerged from the shadows. A guardian clad in weathered armor, eyes glowing with an eerie blue light. The guardian raised a massive sword, blocking Ava's path. Without hesitation, Ava drew her blade, bracing for the fight. The clash of steel rang through the chamber as Ava and the guardian battled fiercely. The guardian's strikes were powerful, each blow threatening to shatter her defenses. Ava dodged and parried, searching for an opening. With a swift maneuver, Ava slashed at the guardian's leg, causing it to stagger. Seizing the moment, she lunged forward, driving her sword into the guardian's chest. The guardian emitted a haunting wail before collapsing to the ground, its glowing eyes fading. As the figure dissolved into dust, a hidden door slid open behind it. Ava stepped through the doorway, heart pounding. Beyond lay the final chamber, the source of the castle's dark curse. Eva entered the final chamber, the air thick with malevolence. At its center lay an ancient altar, cracked and stained with dried blood. Pulsating from within was a dark crystal, radiating an ominous energy that seemed to suck the light from the room. As Ava approached, the crystal's power surged, filling her with visions of despair. Lost souls screaming in torment, shadows creeping across lifeless faces. Suddenly, a monstrous apparition materialized, towering over her with twisted limbs and glowing red eyes. It was the source of the curse, a being born from darkness itself. Eva drew her sword, determination hardening her gaze. The battle was fierce. The creature struck with brutal force, its claws tearing through stone and flesh. Eva dodged, countered, and struck back with every ounce of strength. Bloodied but unyielding, Eva finally found an opening. With a powerful thrust, she shattered the dark crystal, unleashing a blinding light that engulfed the chamber. The creature let out a deafening roar before dissolving into nothingness. The curse was broken. Light returned to the castle, and with it, hope. The oppressive darkness lifted as dawn's first light filtered through shattered windows. Eva stood amidst the ruins, her body battered but spirit unbroken. The castle, once a prison of despair, now shimmered with renewed life. Survivors from the expedition, few but resilient, gathered around her, eyes filled with relief and hope. The curse was broken, the ancient evil defeated. Their nightmare had ended. Eva looked to the horizon, feeling the weight of loss for those who had fallen, yet embracing the promise of a new beginning. The village beyond the forest would hear of their triumph and the secrets they uncovered. Together, they would rebuild. The shadows that haunted the castle would fade into legend, a warning for future generations. As the sun rose higher, Eva whispered a silent vow to protect the light they had fought so hard to reclaim. The nightmare was over, but their story had just begun. Thank you for joining me on this dark and thrilling journey into the expedition into the Forbidden Abyss. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of mystery, adventure, and the supernatural, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me bring more chilling stories right to you. Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next adventure. Good night, and beware the shadows.